So again, thank you so much for joining the Office of Public Instruction this morning in introducing and doing some updates on the cash request process in ESSER. As we begin today, just again, as a reminder, please be sure to have your mute button muted so that there's not a background noise as we are recording this session. These will be then put up on the OPI website for future viewing if you wish to do so. Yesterday's sessions, which were on amendments, are also going to be posted, so you have an opportunity to look at the amendments and how they relate into cash requests. You have three individuals today who are part of the ESSER team presenting. Myself, Wendy Fawns, who is the ESSER and EANS director, and Rebecca Brown, who is the program manager, and Steve Morgan, who is the accountant. So we have all of these opportunities or these individuals that you can contact throughout today's sessions. You can ask questions of, but also you can contact us afterwards if you have follow-up to today's session. So I'm going to go ahead and start the process with Rebecca Brown, and she'll start us off on the journey of cash requests.
Awesome. Thank you, Wendy. On this slide, we've got my contact information as well as Steve's contact information. We will also have this at the end of the presentation as well. But again, if you ever have questions as you are working through the ESSER grants, questions about e-grants or amendments or things like that can come to me. Questions specific to the accounting processes such as cash requests or the final expenditure reports, those can go to Steve, our grant accountant. So through this session, we have a few goals that we want to address with you folks. We're going to talk about submitting cash requests, kind of a high-level view of how does the overall process work. I know that we've got some folks here who are new to their positions who haven't done a cash request yet, so hopefully we can answer a lot of those questions. We also have some templates that we will share that you can use as you are going through submitting cash requests. We will show you how to find the feedback on cash requests if and when a cash request gets returned to you for changes. OPI does leave feedback for you to refer to and use to change your cash requests. We'll also point out where to find the budget pages so that you can compare your cash requests to what you have budgeted. We will highlight the use of funds category, which is a common issue that we see sometimes. And so we wanted to make sure that we address that for you folks. We'll talk through the timeline of cash requests and how that review process works. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll have an open question and answer session. So first question here is, how do I find cash requests? I know that we have several people who are new to their positions, whether you are a clerk or a business manager or a superintendent. You can find previous cash requests in eGrants. And in order to do that, you will log into eGrants. And if you are a clerk or a superintendent for multiple schools, you'll need to make sure that you click on the correct school so that you can see that school's grants and cash requests. And then once you're in that eGrants Access Select page where you can see all of your grants for each fiscal year, you'll look at the grant that you are the correct grant that you're trying to view the cash request for, and you'll click on the blue payments button over on the right side of the screen next to the grant, and that will take you into the payment summary menu. And then in that payment summary menu, this is the screenshot that's over on the right side of your screen right now. That payment summary menu gives you a high-level summary of how much your grant was allocated and how much has been spent out of the grant, as well as how much is left over in the grant. So in the cash request, or in the payment summary that you can see in this screenshot, you can see that this grant at the bottom where it says remaining payments, they have $0 left. They have spent down everything that was in that grant. Then after you are in the payment summary menu, in order to see the cash requests themselves, you will click on the blue button that says view cash request / expenditure reports, and that will pull up all of the cash requests that have previously been submitted, as well as if there has been a final expenditure report submitted, it'll pull that up in this menu as well. And then once you're in that menu, you can view the specifics of the existing cash request by selecting the bubble next to the cash request you want to look at, and then clicking the blue Open Request button. And that will open up the request. You'll see the different budget categories that money was pulled out of, how much money was requested, as well as a description of those expenditures. Then, after you've looked at existing cash requests, the next question is, well, how do I make a new request? Well, in that same cash request menu where you can see all of the existing cash requests, there is a blue button that says Create New Request. And I do want to point out here on the left side of your screen right now, you see there's a red circle around a box that says ESSER 3 Base. In the ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 consolidated grants, there are multiple budget pages, essentially multiple buckets that money can be requested out of. And in ESSER 2 and ESSER 3, you will have to select the budget page that you are requesting money out of. In ESSER 1, ARP Summer and ARP After School, this box doesn't exist because there's only one budget page. So I wanted to make sure that we pointed that out so that you know where to find it. But then as soon as you select the correct budget page, you can click on Create New Request, and that will start a brand new cash request for you. Once you start a new cash request, it'll open up a menu that shows these items here. The screenshot up on the top of your screen shows the first row of a cash request, and you can see you can create line items for the different expenditures you wish to purchase. Different line items can be for different budget categories or object codes, and or different use of funds. After you fill in the blanks, there are drop-down menus for object code and use of funds. And then in the expenditure description and itemization box, that is just a text box where you can put in the language of what it is you are actually purchasing. And we will talk more about this text box here in just a minute, but this is where we're going to recommend some template language for you to use so that it's really clear exactly how this expenditure, this cash request, relates to what is already in your grant budget. And then after you fill out these lines, then at the bottom, towards the bottom of the page, there is a text box where you need to enter the end period expense date. You can't submit a cash request without a date in here, so that does need to be filled in. After you do that, you'll select Calculate Totals down at the bottom. eGrants will essentially add up everything that is in this cash request and calculate the totals, and also compare it to what was already budgeted in your grant budget. And then after you calculate totals, there is a spot where you can upload receipts or pay stubs or essentially documentation showing what this cash request is actually going to reimburse or to pay for. And then lastly, after you've got all of that filled in and uploaded, you'll just select Save Page down at the bottom of the page, and then you will submit it. So to submit your cash request, you will go to the Submit tab up at the top of the screen. In this tab, you will need to run a consistency check, which again is just where eGrants goes in and it compares between the budget pages and what's in your cash request, and it just makes sure that everything lines up. If there are any issues at this point, eGrants will give you a red error message up at the top of your screen. Please pay attention to those error messages because you can't submit until they're all fixed. And then after, if you don't have any error messages, you'll click the Submit button. If you are a business manager or a clerk, when you hit the Submit button, that will go to your authorized representative, and then your authorized representative will be able to submit it to OPI. After OPI gets it, we will review it and then either approve it, or we will leave feedback and return it back to you if things need to be fixed. So that is how the whole process works of creating and submitting a cash request. And like I said, I wanted to highlight this text box where you enter the expenditure description and itemization. This is essentially where you explain what it is that this cash request is purchasing. And what we recommend here is that this description needs to match the descriptions that are in the grant budget pages. If your budget pages have something completely different than what's in your cash requests, then when our accountants look at it, they go, well, these two things don't match. We can't approve that. So we do need a really clear connection between the budget pages, the amendment description, if you've done any amendments, and the language that's actually in the cash request. This helps our accountants be able to approve it more seamlessly, more smoothly, and also it establishes a really clear audit trail. So if an auditor were to ever look at this grant, they could see the connection between what's in the budget and what you actually requested money for. So in working with schools throughout Montana for over the course of several months, Wendy worked with these schools, and we kind of came up with a boilerplate or a template for language that we recommend you use in those descriptions. This language needs to talk about, you know, how much money is being requested. Obviously, this is a cash request, and then the purpose of the request. So what is it that you are actually requesting money for? Is this paying for teacher salaries and benefits? Is this paying for devices such as Chromebooks? Like, be specific about what it is actually purchasing. And sub note here, remember, this needs to connect what's already in the grant budget or amendments. And then the last four or five check marks here in this list are relating that purchase to the requirements of the grant. So how does this purchase respond to, prevent, or prepare for the effects of COVID-19? And specifically, how do your students gain or benefit from this purchase? So you want to be specific here. Like, for example, if this cash request were for Chromebooks for students, let's say your school is purchasing one Chromebook for every student, you've got one-to-one device usage so that students are not sharing devices between themselves. And so therefore you're limiting the spread of germs or infection because we're not sharing surfaces. Chromebooks allow students to access curriculum remotely if they ever need to stay home. So if there was a COVID-related isolation or closure, that responds to the COVID-related isolation or closure, and it also helps to address learning loss that is related to COVID. I mean, we had school closures, we had delays, we had students who had to stay home sick, and a device will help to respond to those COVID-related learning loss items. And so there's often several ways that you can relate the purchase to how students benefit and how it prepares, prevents, or responds to COVID-19. Here on this next slide, we've got an example of a good cash request. We've got a screenshot of what was originally in the budget, and then below it, a screenshot of the cash request. And if you compare here, they've got the same language in the budget and the cash request. And that's what we're really looking for here, is that very clear connection between the two of them, right? And then a question that I've gotten a few times is, how do I delete a cash request? Sometimes you go in and instead of clicking on open request, you accidentally click create new request and you didn't mean to do that. Or perhaps somebody started a cash request and then for whatever reason, that cash request may have been in the wrong grant or it was requesting the wrong things. So cash requests can be deleted as long as they have not been submitted to OPI yet. After a cash request gets submitted to OPI, it can't be deleted anymore. But in order to delete a cash request, you'll go into that cash request / expenditures page where it shows all of your cash requests. You'll select the bubble next to the cash request you want to get rid of. And then there's this blue delete request button that's being pointed out by the arrow here. And after you do that, that cash request is no more. It goes away. And again, that it only works if the cash request has not been submitted to OPI yet. All right. And then we did want to point out the different budget pages in the different grants. Like I said a little bit ago, ESSER 2 and ESSER 3, those are consolidated grants in eGrants where they have multiple budget pages. And so you need to select the correct budget page that you're trying to look at. So in order to do that, up in the top right-hand corner of the grant application itself, there's this drop-down menu. There's a screenshot there on your screen. And that drop-down menu shows all of the different budget pages that you can choose from. On the right-hand side of your screen, ESSER 1, ESSER-related services, the ARP Summer and the ARP After School grants, those have only one budget page each. So there's no drop-down menu. It's just a tab up at the top of the grant application. So that's where you can find what was budgeted in each of your grants. And that's a good place to look before you do a cash request so that you can compare to exactly what is in the budget. All right. The next thing that we want to talk about is highlighting the specific use of funds and some other common confusion that we see in cash requests that get submitted. Steve, would you like to present the next few slides?
Thank you. Good job, Rebecca. So the most common errors that we're finding when clerks or administrators submit cash requests usually falls with the use of funds. So you need to pay specific attention to the use of funds category when you submit a budget item. Accounts are unable to be approved as a cash request when the approved budget reflects $0 available. So the use of funds in the cash request must match the your district's original approved budget. And go ahead, go to the next slide. So here's an example. The top screenshot shows use of funds, and you can see that supplemental learning was incorrectly selected. And if you look to the right, where in green it says the final approved budget is $0, there's nothing that can be allocated to your district or given to your district in a cash request. So notice again that the final approved budget reflects an available amount of $0, and supplemental learning was selected incorrectly. But if you look below at the screenshot with the circling of blue, notice the two words that are so similar, supplemental learning and supplemental services, which is an easy error to make by just thinking you've selected the correct one. So in the district's budget's detail sheet, it indicated that supplemental services should have been properly selected for the use of funds, and that's why you have an error. Next slide, please. So with a cash request here, make sure that when you're comparing your originally approved OPI district budget with your cash request, make sure that everything matches. So you have your object code that you want to make sure that you're correctly choosing, the use of funds, and then you, in your expenditure description and itemization, that you have something that is related into your originally approved budget. And as you can see in this one that was correctly submitted, that everything matches, all the fields match. Next slide, please.
All right, so here we've got just kind of a general timeline of how the cash request process works. I know we've gotten this question from a couple of schools, but essentially what we really want you to understand here is that our grant accountants process hundreds of cash requests every month from 400 plus Montana school districts and other agencies. And these take time to process. When our grant accountants look at a cash request, they're looking at the cash request. They're also looking at the budget and comparing between the two to make sure that things line up and you're requesting out of what you had already budgeted. And that takes time. And so if you submit a cash request and it hasn't been processed right away, we do appreciate your patience as our accountants process all of these requests. But with that being said, if you submit a request and you go 2 weeks without hearing anything, please reach out to us so that we're aware of your request being in process, and perhaps if there's an issue in eGrants, we can find it. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. But as we are reviewing cash requests, if it's easy to fully understand what's happening in the cash request, the approval process is a lot quicker and easier and smoother, and it'll have a shorter turnaround time. But if there are any points of confusion or clarification, or if there's errors like the use of funds that Steve pointed out, those will result in your cash request being returned to you for changes. And you can see feedback on the cash requests by going into that cash request menu and clicking on review checklist or review cash request. But look at the feedback on the cash request, see what the issue was. And then if you don't understand, or if you need help or clarification, please call us so that we can get it processed more quickly. As the dates you can see on your screen, cash requests need to be submitted by the 25th of each month in order for them to be paid out by the 10th of the next month. So for example, we're coming up on the 25th of September here pretty soon. If you were to submit a cash request today, that's before the 25th. And so that cash request would be able to be processed and paid out to you by the 10th. If you submitted on the 25th, that cash request could be processed and paid out by the 10th of the next month. But let's say you got busy, you missed the deadline of the 25th. Gosh dang it. Well, your cash request, like let's say you submitted a cash request on the 27th. That's after the deadline of the 25th. And so that cash request probably won't be processed and paid out until the 10th of the next month, which would be November instead of October. So your cash request will still be processed. It's just that it's delayed by a month because it didn't make that deadline of the 25th. All right. And if there's confusion or clarification on this timeline, please just let us know. We'd be happy to look into it with you. But that's just a general understanding of how quickly your cash request will be processed and when you can expect it to be paid out by. And then let's see, on this next slide here, we've got lots of resources on the OPI website. When you go to the OPI website at OPI.MT.GOV, it's up at the top of your screen there. Homepage has a great big blue ESSER button that's circled on this screenshot. That ESSER button will take you to our ESSER webpage, where we have tons of ESSER specific resources for you. This presentation right now that's being recorded, this will be posted on that website as well as the slides and resources that we've shared here with you today. And there's just so much information on that website for you. We do understand that because there's so much information, it can be a little bit hard to navigate. So we are actually in the process of reviewing our ESSER webpage and editing the layout a little bit to make it easier for you to navigate and find the resources that you're actually looking for. We're hoping that those website changes will be good to go and published by the beginning of October, but keep an eye out in the future for those changes coming forth. So at this point, we are done with the presentation part of this session. And so I'm going to stop recording and we will move into an open Q&A. Thank you all for being here today.